The crystal champagne flute slipped from my fingers before I could catch it, shattering against the marble floor of the Evergreen Manor ballroom like a vow broken in the dead of night. Juliana Harrington, heir to the Harrington Textiles fortune, destined for a match that will weave our legacies eternal. My mother's voice echoed in my ear from earlier that evening, her words a silken noose disguised as affection. But now, as the spotlight sliced through the haze of cigar smoke and murmured fortunes, Hilaire Voss stepped onto the auction stage. Not as a ghost from my fevered dreams, but as flesh and fire, her gaze locking onto mine across the sea of pearl-necklaced widows and tailored tycoons, daring me to remember the Vermont winters we had stolen for ourselves. I had always known the Harrington name carried weight, the kind that pressed down on your chest until breathing felt like defiance. Born in the shadow of the Green Mountains in a sprawling estate outside Burlington, Vermont, where the maples bled red each fall like accusations of passion too wild for polite society, I grew up threading needles through the family's legacy. Textiles, they called it. Fine linens and silks that draped the beds of presidents and the ballrooms of the elite. But to me it was just thread pulling tighter with every expectation. My father, Reginald, had built the empire from nothing, a self-made man from the dusty mills of Lowell, Massachusetts, who married into old money and never let us forget the cost. Mother, Beatrice, with her clipped vowels and collection of antique brooches, ensured we paid it forward. Family first, Juliana, she would say, her eyes scanning me like flawed fabric. Everything else is just seam work. At 28, I managed the creative side of Harrington Threads, sketching patterns inspired by the fog-shrouded lakes of my childhood, patterns that hid bolder strokes beneath their symmetry. But boldness had no place in the invitations that arrived like summons. The winter pairing gala, an annual ritual in Boston's Beacon Hill, where the daughters of industry were paraded like prized bolts of cloth for the highest bidder's gaze. Not a true auction, of course, no one said that aloud, but a veiled marketplace of alliances, where a well-placed glance could seal mergers worth millions. I had dodged it for years, citing deadlines or migraines, but this season mother's health scare, a vague flutter in her heart, dramatic as a Victorian novel, had guilt me into compliance. For the family, she whispered over tea in our Burlington parlor, the fire crackling like unspoken judgments. The drive from Vermont had been a blur of salted highways and skeletal oaks, the Adirondacks looming like silent witnesses to my reluctance. Boston welcomed me with its familiar bite. The Charles River iced over under sodium lamps, the cobblestones of Beacon Hill slick with sleet. Evergreen Manor rose like a frosted wedding cake, its Georgian facade hiding ballrooms where deals were danced into existence. I arrived in a gown of midnight velvet, my own design, high-necked and unforgiving, as if armor could shield me from the inevitable. The air inside hummed with low strings and the clink of heirloom silver, scents of pine and aged bourbon weaving through the crowd. Women in ermine shawls clustered like conspirators, men in tuxedos with cufflinks heavy as anchors. I nodded through introductions, my smile a practice stitch, charmed, to the shipping magnate's son from Nantucket, delighted, to the venture capitalist eyeing me like a quarterly report. Hilaire's entrance shattered it all. The MC, a silver-haired relic named Harlan Crow, cleared his throat into the microphone, his voice booming like a gavel. Ladies and gentlemen, our next vision of tomorrow's legacy. Miss Hilaire Voss, curator of the Voss Gallery in Portland, Maine, bringing artistry to our industrial hearts. The spotlight caught her mid-stride, turning her into a silhouette etched in gold. She wore a gown of emerald silk that caught the light like forbidden moss, her dark hair pinned in loose waves that spoke of windswept coasts. At 30, she looked unchanged from the girl who had once traced constellations on my skin under Vermont stars, fierce, unyielding, with eyes like smoked quartz that saw through pretenses. My breath caught a hook in my ribs. Hilaire Voss. The name alone summoned ghosts. Our summer in the wilds of Acadia, where she sketched seascapes while I wove tales of escape. The winter cabin in the White Mountains, where whispers turned to promises sealed in frost-kissed silence. We had met 3 years prior at a textile symposium in Portland, her gallery showcasing prints on linen I had supplied. She was fire to my thread, born to a lobsterman's daughter in a clapboard house on Casco Bay, raised on salt air and stories of shipwrecks. No fortune, no pedigree, just a scholarship to RISD and a hunger for beauty that outshone any bank account. Our worlds collided in a supply closet, Her laughter muffled against my shoulder as rain lashed the windows. "Your trouble wrapped in silk," she had murmured, and I believed her. But trouble has teeth. 6 months in, Mother discovered a letter Alara's handwriting, looping like waves, slipped from my portfolio. The confrontation was a masterclass in quiet venom. Dinners cancelled, accounts frozen, whispers of scandal rippling through Burlington's knitting circles. "This liaison," Mother said, the word spat like spoiled milk, "threatens everything we've built. The Harringtons do not unravel." Father, ever the pragmatist, offered Alara a settlement. A gallery grant, anonymous, if she vanished. She refused, of course. Alara Voss bowed to no one, but the pressure mounted. Protests outside the estate. Anonymous tips to the press about irregularities in my designs. I folded first in the end, begging her to let go for her own sake. "It's not you," I lied into the phone, the line crackling like our breaking hearts. "It's the weave of it all." She left for Maine that night, the gallery thriving in her absence, her name a whisper in art circles from Bar Harbor to Boston. I buried myself in work, patterns growing tighter, colors muted. Until now. As she ascended the stage, her chin lifted in that defiant tilt I knew so well, our eyes met. Time fractured. The ballroom faded to echoes of crashing waves, the crowd to shadows of pines. What was she doing here? The Voss name held no Harrington weight. Portland was bohemian driftwood to Boston's polished oak. Yet there she stood, poised as if born to it, a bitter's paddle already twitching in a dowager's hand from the front row. Harlan droned on. "Miss Voss offers not just grace but vision. A partnership that marries art to enterprise." Bids murmured like distant thunder. 50,000 for a season sponsorship, 75 for gala privileges. I gripped the edge of a velvet settee, knuckles whitening. This was no accident. Alara's gaze held mine, not pleading but piercing. A challenge wrapped in sorrow. Had she come to reclaim something? Or to burn it all down? The gavel hovered. My pulse thundered. In that suspended breath I saw us again. Tangled in flannel sheets by a wood stove, her fingers mapping the freckles on my collarbone like uncharted bays. "We're the outliers, Jules," she had said, voice husky with dawn. "But outliers make the strongest stories." Now her story was auctioned, piece by glittering piece. I wanted to scream, to shatter the illusion like my dropped glass. Instead, I whispered her name to the empty air beside me, a prayer or a curse. As the bids climbed, so did the bile in my throat. 100,000. From a steel heir with a reputation for collecting wives like vintage cars. Alara's lips curved, not in smile but in something sharper, a blade sheathed in silk. She was playing their game, or so it seemed. But I knew her tells. The subtle flex of her jaw, the way her gaze flicked to the exits. This was no surrender. This was strategy, woven from the threads of our shared unraveling. The room pressed in, heavy with the scent of hothouse orchids and old grievances. Mother glided toward me, her arm linking mine like a chain. "Darling, compose yourself. The Yates boy is watching." Yates, bland as boiled wool, heir to pharmaceuticals, his interest in me as transactional as a stock tip. I nodded mutely, my world tilting toward the stage. Alara's eyes never left mine. Even as the hammer fell. "Sold. To the steel heir, for 120. The applause swelled, a tide pulling me under. She descended, gown whispering against the stairs, straight into the bidder's outstretched hand. But as she passed the wings, her gaze snagged mine once more, a promise in the storm. I excused myself from Mother's grasp, weaving through the throng like a ghost in my own life. The powder room door clicked shut behind me, the mirror reflecting a woman I barely recognized. Hollow-cheeked, eyes storm-bruised. Water ran cold over my wrists, but it did nothing for the fire in my veins. What game was this? Alara, who had once sworn she'd never sell her soul for a spotlight, now center stage in the very circus we fled. Portland to Boston was no small leap. Whispers of her gallery's debts had reached even my insulated ears. Expansion stalled by a recession's chill. Was this her bid for survival? Or revenge, laced with the bitterness of our goodbye? I straightened, smoothing my gown like armor. The night was young, and Evergreen Manor held more shadows than light. I would find her, unravel this thread by thread. For in the quiet core of me, where Harrington duty frayed at the edges, Ilara Voss remained the only pattern that ever felt true. The corridors of Evergreen Manor twisted like veins in a marble heart, leading from the ballroom's fever to the manor's quieter arteries. Libraries lined with leather-bound ledgers of forgotten fortunes, conservatories where camellias bloomed defiant against the January frost. I slipped into the latter, the glass walls fogged with breath from 100 dances, the air thick with the musk of earth and expectation. Moonlight filtered through, silvering the leaves, and there she was, Ilara, silhouetted against a trellis of white roses, her back to me as if the world had conspired this reunion. She turned slowly, the emerald silk catching the light like a signal flare. Jules. My name on her lips, soft as sea foam, yet edged with the salt of old wounds. No surprise in her voice, only a weary recognition, as if she had been waiting for the inevitable collision. I crossed the tiled floor, heels echoing like accusations, stopping just short of touching distance. Up close, the changes whispered. Faint lines at her eyes from late nights cataloging canvases, a strand of silver threading her dark waves like a secret shared with time. What are you doing here? The words escaped me, raw and unguarded, the first crack in my composure since the glass shattered. She tilted her head, that familiar gesture pulling memories like tides. Afternoons in her Portland studio, sunlight slanting through salt-streaked windows as she mixed pigments, me sketching beside her on butcher paper stained with coffee rings. Surviving, she said simply, her voice carrying the cadence of Maine's rugged shores, blunt, unadorned, the galleries drowning in red ink. Collectors vanished with their bonuses, and the banks breathing down my neck. This. She gestured vaguely toward the ballroom's muffled roar. This buys time. A sponsor's check, introductions to the right wallets. It's not forever. Surviving. The word landed like a stone in still water, rippling through the defenses I had built. I thought of the letters I never sent, the nights I paced our Burlington estate, staring at the lake where we had once picnicked under veils of willow. After she left, I threw myself into work, designs for the spring line, intricate jacquards that hid bolder motifs in their folds. But the patterns always frayed at the edges, echoing the way our love had been tugged apart. Society's loom demanded straight lines. Man to woman, old money to new, Harrington to Harrington ally. Ilara was the snag, the wild thread that refused to lie flat. And the auction? I pressed, my voice dropping to a hush, as if the roses might eavesdrop. Parading yourself like one of your paintings. Her laugh was low, bitter as chicory. It's all performance, Jules. You know that better than anyone. Your family's galas, my gallery openings, same script, different props. At least this pays the rent. She stepped closer, the space between us humming with the ghosts of touches withheld. I could smell her. Jasmine and turpentine, the scent of creation and chaos that had once been home. Memories flooded then, unbidden as a squall. Our first winter together, holed up in a rented cabin near Stowe, Vermont, the world buried under 2 feet of snow. No cell service, no expectations, just us, a stack of sketchbooks, and a bottle of bourbon by the hearth. She drew me sleeping, charcoal smudges on her fingers transferring to my cheek when she kissed me awake. You're my North Star, she whispered, tracing the line of my jaw. Steady in the drift. I believed it then, in the glow of embers, before the world intruded with its measuring tapes. But intrude it did. Mother's discovery came mid-blizzard, her calls slicing through the static like a scalpel. Come home, Juliana. Immediately. I drove through the storm, wipers battling the whiteout, Ilara's pleas echoing in the passenger seat. Don't go. We face this together. But fear is a cruel navigator. At the estate, Beatrice waited in the study, a folder of printed emails splayed like evidence in a trial. This woman, she said, her voice a scalpel's edge, is not woven into our fabric. Think of your father, his heart, the empire he clawed from nothing. You would unravel it for whimsy. Whimsy. The word stung, reducing our nights of whispered futures to folly. Father, recovering from a stroke that left his right hand trembling, added his silence, a weight heavier than words. The Harringtons endure, he rasped, eyes pleading for continuity. I chose them in the end, signing away pieces of myself in boardroom oaths and design contracts that buried my bolder strokes. Alara's final text. If this is the pattern, I won't force the fit. Be free, Jules. Even if it breaks us. Now in the conservatory's hush, that break echoed. You left, I said, the accusation slipping free. No fight, no storming the gates. Just gone. Her eyes darkened, storms gathering. I left because you asked. Begged even. For my sake, you said. But we both know it was for yours. For the golden cage you call legacy. She reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve, the touch electric as a live wire. I flinched, not from revulsion, but from the ache of recognition. The ballroom's music swelled faintly, a waltz pulling partners into orbits they could not escape. And now, I whispered, my resolve fraying. This sponsor, the Steel Man, is he part of the performance? Alara's hand dropped, her expression shuddering like a gallery at closing. He's a means, Jules. A foot in the door to Boston's collectors. The Voss Gallery isn't some hobby. It's my blood, my mother's legacy from the docks. I won't let it sink because love couldn't weather the tide. Love. The word hung, luminous and lacerating. She turned toward the glass, fogging it with her breath, drawing a lazy wave with her fingertip, a echo of our old games. I joined her, our shoulders brushing, the camellias watching like silent judges. Outside, snow fell in earnest, blanketing Beacon Hill in hush. I never stopped, I admitted, voice cracking like thin ice. The designs, the late nights, they were all sketches of you. Curves in the cloth where your laugh should be. She faced me then, close enough to map the flecks in her eyes, amber in the quartz. Then why stay threaded to them? Your mother's web, your father's loom. It's choking you, Jules. I see it in the way you hold yourself, like a bolt afraid to unspool. The door creaked, a footman peering in with a tray of cordials. We sprang apart, propriety's reflex. Miss Harrington? Your mother requests your presence for the Yeats introduction. His tone was neutral, but his eyes flicked to Alara, curiosity sharpening the edges. Tell her I'll be there shortly, I replied, stealing my voice. He nodded, retreating, the door sealing us back in fragile solitude. Alara's gaze held warning. Go. Play the part. But remember, performances end at midnight. She slipped away then, melting into the corridor's shadows, leaving me with the imprint of her warmth and the sting of unfinished sentences. I lingered, tracing her wave on the glass until it smeared to nothing. The waltz called, insistent as a heartbeat. Yeats waited, bland and expectant, a safe harbor in mother's eyes. But harbors can drown you slow. As I re-entered the fray, the room spun with faces half known. The shipping widow from earlier, her paddle still clutched like a talisman. Harlan Crow schmoozing bids like old friends. Mother intercepted me near the punch bowl, her smile a lace glove over iron. There you are, darling. Mr. Yeats has such prospects. Pharma expansions into Europe. A match for the ages. I murmured assent, scanning the crowd for Emerald. There Alara, arm linked with her bidder. The steel heir's hand possessive on her elbow. He leaned in, whispering something that made her nod, her laughter tinkling like crystal under strain. Jealousy coiled, hot and irrational. Was this the performance or had time rewritten her script? The evening blurred. Dances with faceless suitors, toasts to futures forged in boardrooms. But my thoughts looped to Alara's words. Outliers make the strongest stories. By the time the auction's final lot closed, a sapphire necklace for a charity facade, I was unraveling. Slipping onto the veranda, the cold slapped me awake, snowflakes melting on my lashes. Boston sprawled below, lights winking like conspirators. Footsteps crunched behind me. Alara, shawl draped like a cape. Escaping already? Breathing, I corrected. We stood shoulder to shoulder. The city a canvas of possibility and peril. Tell me this isn't the end of your story. Her silence stretched, heavy as unshed snow. Then softly. Stories don't end, Jules. They just change threads. She pressed something into my palm. A gallery card, embossed with her Portland address, and beneath it, in her looping script, Midnight, the boathouse. Few dare unspool. She vanished back inside, leaving me with the card's weight and the night's promise. Dare. The word ignited something dormant, a spark in the weave. As the gala whirled on, I danced with Yates, his grip correct but cold, plotting my midnight defection. For once, the outlier in me stirred, ready to rewrite the pattern. Midnight crept in on velvet paws, the gala's crescendo fading to embers. Stragglers nursing brandies, servants whisking away the detritus of deals struck in whispers. I feigned a headache, mother's concern laced with impatience as she waved me off to a guest suite upstairs. Rest, darling. Tomorrow we solidify with Yates. Her kiss on my cheek was cool as porcelain, a benediction I could no longer stomach. The boathouse crouched at the estate's river edge, a relic from Evergreen's shipping heyday, dark timbers weathered to gray, windows like squinted eyes overlooking the frozen Charles. I navigated the paths by memory, snow muffling my steps, the card in my pocket a talisman against the chill. Burlington winters had taught me this. Cold sharpens the senses, strips illusions to bone. What truths would this night carve? The door yielded with a groan, hinges protesting like old grudges. Inside, lanterns cast pools of amber, illuminating oars stacked like forgotten promises, and a single rowboat shrouded in canvas. Alara waited by the hearth, flames licking at logs that spat inside. She had shed the gown for wool trousers and a fisherman's sweater, her true skin soft and sea-worn. A bottle of bourbon sat on a crate, 2 glasses beside it, condensation beating like tears. You came. Not a question but a exhale, as if she had braced for absence. I closed the distance, shedding my wrap, the fire's warmth a balm against the frost in my veins. I almost didn't, I confessed, sinking onto the bench she patted beside her. Mother's plans for Yates, they're ironclad. A merger disguised as matrimony. Alara poured, the liquid glinting like liquid gold. Iron can bend, Jules. Or break. We clinked glasses, the burn steadying me, unlocking tongues long leashed. Conversation flowed then, halting at first, then torrent. Her gallery struggles, a promising exhibit derailed by a patron's scandal, my design stifled by boardroom vetoes, colors deemed too vivid for conservative tastes. Laughter crept in, tentative at shared absurdities. The time we smuggled lobster from her mother's traps to my family's pantry, scandalizing the cook. But undercurrents pulled darker. Do you regret it? She asked, staring into the flames, bourbon swirling in her glass. Us. The choice. Regret was a river I had dammed, but her question breached it. Every thread, I admitted. The mornings without your coffee, strong as tidewater. The sketches that feel hollow now. I set my glass down, turning to her. In the firelight, her face was a landscape of shadows and light. High cheekbones etched by determination, lips parted as if to speak volumes unsaid. She reached for my hand, calluses from framing canvases rough against my palm. I hated you for a while, she said, voice steady but eyes betraying the storm. For choosing them. Then I hated myself for understanding. Your world, it's not just money, it's anchors. Duty as oxygen. Anchors. Yes. Father's stroke had come during a merger negotiation. His collapse in a Manhattan suite a warning etched in hospital fluorescence. The empire falters without you, the doctor said, but it was Mother who wove the real net. He needs stability, Juliana. Not distractions. Distractions. Alara reduced to a footnote, our love a mere diversion from the ledger's balance. I wrote you, Alara continued, her thumb tracing circles on my skin, old habit, grounding. Letters I burned. Poems about shipwrecks and salvages. Portland's coast is full of them. Reminders that some things wash up whole. The fire popped, embers scattering like escaped thoughts. I leaned in, forehead to hers, breaths mingling in the scant space. Show me, I murmured. The salvage. Our lips met then, tentative as thawing ice, then fervent, a dam breaking. Her hands framed my face, urgent and tender, tasting of bourbon and salt. I melted into her, fingers tangling in her sweater, the world narrowing to this. The creak of wood, the river's distant murmur, the heartbeat sinking like waves to shore. We moved to the blankets she had spread by the hearth, shedding layers not just of cloth but of years, guilt, silences, the weight of unworn rings. After, tangled in wool and warmth, whispers wove new patterns. Run with me, she said, tracing my spine. Portland's small, but the sea's endless. We could start a line, your textiles, my art. No auctions, no empires. The vision bloomed. A studio overlooking the bay, looms humming beside easels, mornings free of summons. But anchors drag. Mother's ill, I said, the lie half-truth. Father's fragile. And the board, they watch every stitch. Alara propped on an elbow, eyes searching. Excuses or chains? You can't weave freedom with bound hands, Jules. Dawn crept gray through the windows, the river stirring to life. We dressed in silence, the afterglow laced with foreboding. As we stepped out, snow blanketing the world anew, a figure emerged from the tree-lean, mother's driver, lantern swinging like a summons. Miss Juliana, your mother requires you. Urgently. Alara's hand tightened on mine, a lifeline. Go. But come back. Tonight, the gallery's winter show in town. Be there. I nodded, stealing a kiss before the driver turned away. The ride back was torture. Estate lights winking like accusatory eyes. Mother waited in the foyer, face ashen, a tablet clutched like a shield. Scandal, Juliana. Photos from the veranda someone saw. And now whispers about Miss Voss. The Yates family is withdrawing. Scandal. The word coiled, venomous. I thought of blurred snapshots in society rags. My silhouette with Alara's implications drawn in ink. It's nothing, I said, but my voice wavered. Nothing. Mother's laugh was brittle. In this world, perception is the loom. Reginald's board meets tomorrow. They'll demand assurances. Marry Yates or watch it all fray. The day blurred into negotiations. Calls to publicists. Damage control scripted like a play. By evening, exhaustion hollowed me, but Alara's invitation burned. The gallery show. A modest space in Boston's seaport. All exposed brick and salt air wafting from the docks. I arrived late, slipping through the crowd of artists and patrons, the air alive with jazz from a corner trio. She found me by a canvas of crashing waves, blues and grays swirling like our reunion. You came. Her smile lit the room, but shadows lingered, the steel heirs card tucked in her pocket, bids still echoing. We wandered the exhibits, her narration pulling me into worlds of driftwood sculptures and luminous seascapes. This one's yours, she said, stopping at a textile piece. My linen dyed in dawn pinks, framed with her sketch of Vermont hills. Collaboration, uncredited until now. But joy fractured when Harlan Crow entered, arm in arm with the steel heir. Miss Voss, he boomed. Your performance last night exquisite. Mr. Langston here is eager for that sponsorship chat. Langston, broad-shouldered, eyes appraising Alara like acquisition. His gaze slid to me, recognition flickering. Harrington, isn't it? Heard about the Gala stir. Family matters, eh? Alara's hand stiffened in mine, hidden behind a partition. Business, she murmured to me, but her eyes pleaded. The quartet struck up a slower tune, couples swaying. Langston extended a hand to her. Dance? Seal the deal. She hesitated, glancing at me. The room spun. Patrons whispering, flash of a phone camera. I released her, the severance of fresh wound. Go, I said, throat tight. Threads first. She danced, graceful in his lead, but her eyes sought mine across the floor. A lifeline stretched thin. Langston's whispers leaned close, his laugh booming. Jealousy gnawed, but worse was the dawning. This was her salvage and I was adrift. The night ended in fragments, her slipping away with him for talks. Me fleeing to the riverwalk, wind-whipping tears I hadn't shed. Back at the manor, Mother's pills rattled on the nightstand, her sleep fitful. Duty anchored, but Alara's words echoed, bend or break. Morning brought the boardroom. A mahogany crypt in downtown Boston, suits like sentinels. Father's proxy voice crackled over speaker. Juliana, the line hangs by a thread. Yates or ruin. I signed preliminaries, ink drying like blood, but my mind sketched escapes. Portland's horizon unclaimed. That afternoon a package arrived at the estate, Alara's sketchbook, pages filled with us. Cabin fires, bay sunsets, a final drawing of me unspooling thread into wings. Tucked inside a note, bend with me, or let go. The choice loomed, iron testing fire. The boardroom's air hung stale, laced with coffee gone bitter and the faint cologne of men who measured success in columns of black ink. I sat at the polished oak table, fingers drumming a silent rebellion against the grain, as Reginald's advisor droned through projections. Harrington threads margins thinning like winter light, competitors from overseas unraveling our domestic hold. A strategic alliance with Yates Pharma, he concluded, sliding contracts across like a loaded deck, secures distribution channels. And personally, his eyes flicked to me, paternal concern masking calculation. Stability for the family. Stability. The word mocked, a chain disguised as comfort. I signed, the pen's nib scratching like claws on bone. Each loop of my J sealing not just paper, but the fraying edges of self. Yates waited in the antechamber, his smile efficient as a merger clause, tall, patrician, with the easy assurance of one who had never questioned his place in the weave. Lunch followed. A discreet club in the financial district, linen napkins crisp as new bills, conversation skirting the personal like a hemline too high. "You're braver than most," he said over seared scallops, fork poised midair. Stepping into the gala fray. "Your mother speaks highly of your designs, innovative yet timeless." Timeless. Code for safe, unthreatening. I murmured thanks, my mind adrift to Alara's sketchbook, now hidden in my valise like contraband. That evening drawing me with wings of thread had haunted my mirror reflections, a siren call to flight. But Yates's world was gravity. Weekends at his Cape Cod compound, summers in the vineyard, a life mapped in trust funds and tax brackets. "To us," he toasted later, over cognac in his Back Bay brownstone, the city light sprawling like a captive sea. I echoed him, glass clinking hollow. Sleep evaded me that night. The guest room's four-poster a cage of brocade and restraint. Dawn found me pacing, phone in hand, Alara's number a lifeline I dared not pull. Instead, I drove to the seaport, the gallery's windows dark but for a security light's glow. Portland seemed a world away. Her world free of ledgers, alive with salt and stroke of brush. What was I weaving here if not a shroud? The week blurred into fittings and filings. Gown alterations for the engagement announcement, legal reviews sealing assets. Mother bloomed under the prospect, her flutter miraculously stilled. Afternoons spent with florists plotting centerpieces in muted ivories. "You'll wear the Harrington pearls," she decreed over tea, her eyes appraising me like heirloom cloth. "A union of strengths." Strengths. I nodded, biting back the truth. Strength lay in the bend, not the bind. Alara's silence stretched. No calls, no sketches slipped under doors. Whispers reached me via society vines. Her sponsorship with Langston progressing, gallery renovations underway. Portland buzzed with Boston backing. Jealousy festered, green as her gala gown, imagining his hands where mine had traced. Then the invitation, engraved vellum from the Voss Gallery. Private viewing. Threads of the coast. No sender named but her looping script in the RSVP line. I went under cover of a design consultation, slipping into the space as dusk bled into neon. The show had transformed it. Walls hung with collaborations, my linens dyed in her oceanic hues, stitched with motifs of lighthouses and leviathans. Patrons milled, glasses chiming, but Alara held court in the back, Langston at her side, his arm a casual drape. She saw me, color draining like tide from shore. "Jules." The nickname a gasp, drawing his gaze. "Langston, this is Juliana Harrington, textile innovator, old friend." Old friend. The demotion stung, but I extended a hand, his grip firm as a contract. "Heard about your impending nuptials," he said, eyes gleaming with the thrill of insider trades. "Yates is lucky. And Alara here, well, she's the spark our little venture needed." Venture. Her gallery, now a satellite of his steel empire. Exhibits branded, expansions funded by his coffers. She excused us, leading me to a side alcove hung with a massive piece. Waves crashing over looms, threads snapping like sails in gale. "It's not what you think," she said, voice low. "The funding strings attached, but necessary. Langston wants influence, not me." "Not you." Skepticism sharpened my tone. "The dances, the whispers. It looks like entanglement." Her eyes flashed, quartz to flint. "Entanglement is your specialty, Jules. Signing away your fire for pearls and pharma. At least my strings are chosen." Hurt laced her words, a mirror to my own unraveling. We argued then, voices hushed but heated. Me accusing compromise, her countering survival. You left first, she hissed. Now you judge my knots? The door swung open, Langston's silhouette filling it. Everything all right, darling? Darling. The endearment landed like a gavel. Fine, she replied, composure snapping back like elastic. Just old threads. He pulled her away into the crowd, his hand on her waist proprietary. I fled to the harbor's edge, waves lapping black and indifferent, the city a glittering trap. Days later, betrayal crystallized. A tabloid snippet, buried in society pages. Voss gallery blooms under Langston patronage, and whispers of more? Grainy photo. Alara on his arm at a charity soiree, her smile polished. Mother waved it under my nose at breakfast, triumph veiled as concern. See? Distractions fade. Focus on Yates. Focus. I buried it in work, but the sketchbook called, pages flipping to that winged self. Desperation brewed a plan. Confront her, demand clarity, or sever clean. The engagement dinner loomed, intimate, at the Harrington estate, but I detoured first to Boston, to the gallery after hours. Alara answered the bell alone, paint-smeared smock over jeans. Surprise softened to sorrow. Jules. Come in. The space hummed with half-finished works. Canvases leaning like confessions. We circled each other, words tumbling. My doubts, her defenses. Langston's pressure. He expects more than checks. Dinner invites turning to overnights. Hints at exclusivity. Her voice cracked. I need the funding, but not at that cost. Then walk, I urged, closing the gap. With me. We'll weave something new. She laughed hollow. And your wedding? Yates's ring on your finger. Not if. But the door buzzed, Langston's voice crackling. Alara? Forgot my scarf. Panic flashed. She shoved me into the storage room, canvases shielding, her body pressing close to silence my breath. He entered, calling, footsteps prowling. Darling? Odd hour for work. Finishing touches. She lied smoothly, emerging. Their murmurs filtered. His proposition veiled as opportunity. Join me in Chicago, seal the deal. Her refusal polite but firm. Door closing on his retreating ire. She freed me, trembling. See? Strings everywhere. We collapsed against the wall, laughter bubbling through fear. Absurd, alive. In that raw moment, lips met again, fierce and forgiving, hands mapping familiar shores. But dawn brought Langston's retaliation. A call to Alara, funding yanked, gallery accounts frozen. Leverage, he texted her, send me anonymously. A leak tracing our gala night, twisted to imply scandal. Whispers hit the board. Harrington airs indiscretions jeopardizing the Yates merger. Mother's fury erupted at luncheon, pearls clattering like judgments. You've shamed us, Juliana. For what? A fleeting fancy. Father via video, his face gaunt. End it. Or the empire falls. Alara called that afternoon voice steel. He's coming for us both. Fight or fold. Fight. The word ignited. We plotted in coded texts. My resignation draft, her emergency exhibit to rally supporters. But as evening fell, Yates arrived early at the estate, ring box in hand, a Harrington tradition, proposal under the maples. Kneeling, he offered. Diamond solitaire, flawless as obligation. Guests hushed, mother beaming. My yes stuck, throat closing. Alara's text buzzed. Gallery tonight. Last chance. I bolted, gown trailing snow, driving reckless through flurries to Boston. The gallery blazed, crowd thick. Artists, patrons, even Crow. Alara on stage, unveiling our collaboration. Threads unbound. Pieces defying norms, bold strokes on fine weave. Langston lurked front row, face thunder. As I pushed through, he rose, voice cutting. Fraud. This art. It's scandal wrapped in cloth. Murmurs swelled. I climbed beside her, hand in hers. No. It's truth. The room held breath. Langston lunged, accusations flying, funding threats, personal slurs. Chaos erupted. Flashes popping, voices clashing. In the melee, Alara turned to me, eyes fierce. Now or never, Jules. I kissed her then, public and unyielding, the room fracturing into gasps and applause. Langston stormed out, but the tide turned. Bids poured for the exhibit, independence stepping in. Mother's call came midnight. Come home. We talk. Not fury but fracture. High tide, but undertow lingered. The fallout cascaded like an avalanche, slow at first, then inexorable, burying the fragile normalcy I had clung to under layers of headlines and hushed phone calls. By morning the tabloids feasted. Harrington airs Gala gambit. Love or legacy? Grainy images from the gallery unveiling. Ilara and I entwined on stage, her hand steady in mine. Splashed across society sections, captions dripping with innuendo. From auction aisle to altar alternative. One quipped, reducing our defiance to spectacle. Burlington's knitting circles, ever the vipers in cashmere, buzzed with betrayal. Old clients canceled orders, citing brand misalignment. Mother's talk unfolded in the estate's sunroom, sunlight slanting through leaded panes like accusatory fingers, illuminating the crystal vases of forced lilies, symbols of purity now wilted at the edges. She sat ramrod, teacup balanced on saucer with the precision of a duelist, father patched in from his recovery suite in Boston General, his image flickering on the tablet like a ghost in ether. Juliana, she began, voice a scalpel honed by decades of boardroom battles. This display. It's not just folly, it's fracture. The Yates merger evaporates, the board fractures, and your father's health endures. I interjected, the word a shield. Seated across from her, sketchbook open on my lap, Ilara's gift, pages thumbed to our unbound threads. I felt the room's weight pressing, but for the first time it bent around me rather than through. Father's empire was built on adaptation, mother. Rigid cloth tears. His voice crackled, weakened but wry. Girls got spine, B. Like her old man. A cough rattled, then silence. Mother's eyes narrowed, assessing the brooch at her throat. A Harrington crest, eagle clutching olive branch, glinting like warning. Spine without strategy is suicide, she countered. We've weathered whispers before. Your phase with that Voss girl 3 years back. But this? Public. Permanent. Phase. The diminishment ignited something primal. A weave tightening in my chest. I rose, pacing to the window overlooking the lake, its surface a mirror of slate skies. It's not a phase, I said, turning. It's the pattern. Ilara. She sees the cloth, not the ledger. With her my designs breathe. Without, they choke. The admission hung raw as exposed seam. Mother's face softened fractionally, a flicker of the woman who had once sketched dresses for me in secret, before duty donned her like armor. And us? She asked, quieter. The name you bear. Reginald clawed it from mill dust. I wove it into silk. You'd unravel for. Love. Love. The word landed soft, a thread pulled loose. I knelt beside her, taking her hand, cool, veined like fine marble. Not unravel. Reweave. Let me show you. She withdrew, but not sharply. Prove it. One season. Launch your unbound line. If it holds, if the numbers thread true, then reconsider. Father's chuckle echoed faintly. Fair bet, B. Girls got the eye. Relief washed, tentative as spring thaw. I hugged her, the embrace stiff but thawing, whispers of be careful masking fear. Yates's retraction came via courier that afternoon. Gracious, bloodless. Circumstances alter alliances, but laced with the sting of spurned expectation. Langston's venom proved sharper. Lawsuits hinted in emails to Ilara. Funding clawbacks crippling her renovations. He'll bury us, she said over coffee in a Back Bay cafe, her face drawn, but eyes alight with the night's residual fire. Not bury, I replied, lacing fingers across the scarred oak table. Buoy. The gallery show bids are pouring. Independence, even a collective from RESD. We mapped it then. My resignation tendered. A sabbatical framed as creative exploration. Portland called. A shared studio where Harrington threads met Voss visions. Sustainable dyes from Maine kelp. Patterns inspired by coastal cartographies. But undertows pull fierce. Whispers followed. At the Burlington Co-op, old friends averting eyes. In Boston's ateliers, suppliers hedging on deliveries. Alara's Portland board, staunch fishermen's sons turned investors, grumbled at the drama, demanding she cut ties. Boston baggage sinks ships. One growled over a call she patched me into, his accent thick as fog. She fought, voice steady. Baggage? It's ballast. Juliana's designs double our draw. But doubt crept in her silences, nights when she'd stare at the bay from our rented loft, temporary, overlooking wharves where lobster boats rocked like uneasy hearts. Winter deepened, gales howling off the Atlantic, mirroring the storms within. My first Unbound collection debuted in a pop-up at her gallery. Bolts of linen storm-dyed in indigos and charcoals, stitched with motifs of breaking waves and emergent stars. Critics trickled in from the Globe, a nod to raw authenticity. From Maine's Arts Rag, a queer coastal renaissance. Sales ticked up, modest but momentum-building. Yet Langston loomed a shadow in pinstripes. He surfaced at a Portland art walk, cornering Alara amid fairy lights strung over fish shacks. I arrived mid-confrontation, his voice low thunder. Slumming it with the Harrington cast-off? That exhibit was mine to fund. Walk away or I pull every string. She stood tall, chin lifted. Your strings choke, Langston. Ours breathe. I stepped forward, arm linking hers. And the cast-off weaves stronger alone. He laughed, cold as January current. Enjoy the hovel. When the novelty fades, she'll crawl back. He left, but his parting shot lingered. Anonymous posts on industry forums, smearing our collab as gimmickry born of scandal. Doubt bloomed then, insidious as mold in damp cloth. Alara withdrew into sketches, her laughter rarer, lines etching deeper around her mouth. What if he's right? She confessed one storm-lashed night, rain lashing windows like judgments. Curled on the loft's sagging sofa, thunder rumbling, she traced my palm. I'm the millstone, Portland roots too tangled for your flight. I burned it in the sink, flames curling like escaped freedoms, but the ash clung. Alara saw, eyes shadowed. Go back, Jules. Weave the empire your way. I'll manage. No. The refusal rooted deep. We redoubled. A joint pitch to ethical investors, crowdfunding for the line. Allies emerged, a queer collective in Provincetown, offering space. A Vermont weavers co-op, hungry for bold patterns. Crescendo built to the spring showcase. Boston's Institute of Contemporary Art, Loned Hall buzzing with press. We unveiled Unraveled Horizons, installations where visitors wove their own threads into communal looms, stories stitched alongside. Alara's paintings framed my cloths, her seas meeting my mountains in hybrid grace. Crowd swelled. Mother's tentative presence in the wings, pearls subdued. Father's proxy nod via video. Langston crashed it, suit impeccable, entourage in tow. Amateur hour, he sneered to reporters, but his eyes betrayed hunger. Our piece is already coveted. Mid-unveiling, he cornered me by the looms. Last chance, Harrington. Buy her out. Or I expose the inspirations. Your little Gala tryst as muse? Tasteless. Expose. The threat coiled, but I straightened, thread in hand. Expose all you like. It's the weave that endures, not the snips. Alara joined, our hands entwining over the loom. A public nodding. He deflated, retreating to mutters. The night peaked. Bids soared, mother's quiet proud whispered as she embraced me. But as lights dimmed, Alara pulled me aside, face pale. A letter from Langston's lawyers. He's claiming theft. My sketches, your designs. Proprietary exchanges from the sponsorship talks. Theft. Betrayal's blade twisted deep. Our foundation cracked, waves crashing not in art, but in courtrooms. Tanvio swept in, relentless as riptide. The lawsuit landed like a nor'easter. Papers served in the loft's dim kitchen. Dawn light slanting across eviction notices and interrogatories stacked like accusations. Langston's firm, old money mercenaries from a Newberry Street high-rise. Alleged intellectual piracy. Alara's sketches inappropriate during confidential sponsorship discussions. My textiles mere derivatives peddled as innovation. Willful infringement. The lead attorney intoned over a video deposition, his face a mask of practiced outrage, cufflinks flashing like tiny gavels. Ms. Voss traded visions for viability. Now she peddles them with your complicity. Complicity. The word echoed in the hollows of our days, as Portland's spring bloomed mocking. Lilacs unfurling in the commons while we huddled over legal briefs, coffee cold and untouched. Alara paced the wharfside paths, her artist's hands clenched, voice fraying at edges. He knew every stroke I showed him in those meetings. Now it's weapons. Her eyes, once steady as lighthouses, dimmed with the weight of it, nights spent redrawing boundaries on napkins, erasing what couldn't be reclaimed. I absorbed the blows, shuttling between Maine and Vermont. Depositions in Boston's federal courthouse, where marble halls swallowed footsteps like secrets. Strategy sessions with a pro bono queer rights firm. Their offices a rainbow riot in Cambridge basements. Mother support trickled, discreet checks to our counsel framed as family prudence, but laced with pleas. Settle, Juliana. Preserve the weave. Father Freilier now sent a single voice note. Fight smart, girl. Empires bend but don't break. Bend. We did, folding into each other for solace. Evenings on the loft's fire escape. Bay winds carrying salt and solace. Her head on my shoulder as we traced constellations through city haze. Remember Stowe? She'd murmur, fingers interlacing. Snowbound, us against the world. I'd nod, kissing her temple, but the world siege pressed. Gallery doors padlocked pending injunctions, my unbound bolt seized in warehouses, headlines twisting defiance to desperation. Langston's deposition was theater. Summoned to a Back Bay conference room, he lounged like a deposed king, recounting betrayals with theatrical sighs. I invested heart and capital, he claimed, eyes sliding to Alara across the table. She repaid with pilfered passion. Sketches shared in trust, now splashed for scandal. Lies layered thick, but his smirk cracked when our counsel produced emails. His propositions rebuffed, funding yanked in petulant spite. Harassment, not patronage. The lawyer pressed and Langston shifted, the room's air thickening with unraveling pretense. Yet the toll mounted. Alara withdrew, sketches abandoned, her once vibrant studio a mausoleum of half-finished Cs. What if we lose? She whispered one midnight, curled against me in the loft's narrow bed, rain pattering like impatient fingers. The gallery mother's legacy gone, and us. Collateral. Lose. The specter haunted, but in her vulnerability I found ferocity. We don't lose, I said, cupping her face, thumbs brushing tears like errant threads. We rethread. This isn't theft, it's testimony. We rallied then. Crowdfunding surged anew, supporters stitching virtual quilts of encouragement. A Vermont ally smuggled seized bolts for a guerrilla pop-up in Burlington's Old Mill District. Raw space, raw art, crowds weaving their stories into ours. The trial proper unfolded in Portland's federal court, a squat brick edifice overlooking the bay, gulls wheeling like impartial jurors. June sun baked the proceedings, humidity frizzing tempers as witnesses paraded. Langston's entourage, voices oily with feigned injury. Our parade of creators, RISD profs vouching originality, co-op weavers testifying fusion over filch. Alara took the stand midweek, her testimony a masterpiece. Voice steady as she recounted inspirations drawn from shared lives, not stolen confidences. Art isn't owned, she declared, eyes locking on Langston across the aisle. It's borrowed light, passed hand to hand. I followed, heart hammering like a loom at full tilt. Our work is collaboration, I stated, gesturing to exhibit panels. Our pieces released on bond, glowing under fluorescence. Not conquest. Mr. Langston sought control. We chose freedom. Gasps rippled as I revealed his texts. Propositions laced with threats. The judge's gavel a punctuation of rebuke. Deliberation stretched 2 days, the city holding breath with us. Walks along the eastern promenade. Hands clasped against the unknown. Lobster rolls shared in silence. Tastes of home amid havoc. On the third, verdict rang. Dismissal with prejudice, sanctions on Langston for bad faith. Frivolous pursuit, the judge intoned. Born of personal pique, not property right. The courtroom erupted, our allies cheering, Alara collapsing into my arms, sobs muffled in my shoulder. A dam breaking to floodplains of relief. Langston slunk out, empire dented but unbowed, his glare a parting shot. But we emerged scathed yet scarred strong. Gallery doors flung wide, unbound line relaunched with venture backing from ethical funds. Mother attended the relaunch gala. Not auction but open weave in Burlington, her arm on mine as we toured installations, pearls traded for a simple shawl of my design. You wove well, she conceded, eyes misty. Father discharged, joined via stream toasting. To outliers. Summer deepened our roots. Portland studio humming, looms and easels in tandem, mornings of coffee and critique, evenings of bay sunsets where we sketched futures unhemmed. Alara's laugh returned, full-throated as we planned expansions, satellite spaces in Vermont, collaborations with indigenous weavers. Scars lingered. Her sketches bolder now, etched with storm, my patterns looser, embracing flaws as features. One August eve, under a meteor shower arcing over Casco Bay, we sat on the wharf's end, feet dangling over ink-black water. We survived, she said, head on my knee, fingers toying with a loose thread on my cuff. More, I replied, tilting her chin. We thrived. Outliers, remember. Stars streaked, wishes unspoken, but our story etched in the quiet. Love not as rebellion but reclamation. Against looms of legacy, tides of taboo, the cruel cut of convention. Society shifted slow. Invitations trickled, cautious but curious. Mother's circles thawed, whispers turning to wary nods. We built bridges, not walls, panels on queer craft, scholarships for artists adrift. The Harrington name endured, evolved. Threats now inclusive, dyed in spectra beyond muted grays. In the end, freedom wasn't flight, but footing, two souls weaving against the warp, creating cloth resilient as heart. And in the hush of Portland nights, with Alara's breath sinking to mine, I knew. The strongest stories aren't straight lines, but the bold bends that bind us true.